Compost recipe card with you today. You're going to write your recipe for making vermicompost on this side of your Venn diagram. And you'll be writing your recipe for backyard composting on this side of the Venn diagram. The overlapping part in the middle on a Venn diagram shows what could go in either kind of compost system. So it will go both for worms and both in the backyard. When you've finished your compost recipe card, you'll have all kinds of great ingredients. I want you to be sure to remember to put some little raindrops in there because you must add water as you go. There are also some things you don't put in your vermicomposting system, so we'll be putting them in a bucket. When you, on your own paper, you'll be writing what you don't put in your system on your trash can. Sometimes it helps to cross out the word after you've used it if you're going to write your words on your trash can. Words. Some of you might be cutting out words from the word bank and using a glue stick to put them on. There's your Venn diagram recipe. And here is the trash can filled with things you do not compost. Now, we have kind of a rule for making your recipes. If you're 5 years old, I want you to be sure you put at least 5 words on your paper or 5 strips of words. If you're 10 years old, you need at least 10 words on your paper. Now, let me see. Before we start making our recipe together, I want you to tell me the name of what would be nitrogen. What color feedstock? Would that be green? Right. What kind of feedstock would it be? What color if it's carbon?
Brown.
Brown. You are so right. All right, we're going to start by showing you the recipe and sorting materials, feedstocks, in our Venn diagram. Start your large one this way too by putting some branches or small twigs at the bottom. You want to be sure they're shredded. And that's your first carbon ingredient.
And beginning ingredient for your mini worm compost or your vermicomposting is shredded newspaper. But that shredded newspaper also needs a little bit of water added to it, so it's the consistency and texture of a wrung out sponge. Just add a little bit of water to that.
Next, I'm going to add some chopped up green trimmings. That's my nitrogen source. And then I, too, am going to add some water to my compost.
Once we have our shredded newspaper in there, we need to add in our squirm of worms.
The next thing I have are diseased plants. You do not want to put any diseased plants in your backyard or your vermicompost system. Into the bucket they go. That's a no.
And since we have our worms in there, we have some no's for the worms as well. Dairy and bread are two things that definitely do not go to the worms. Put that in our don't bucket. Put the dairy and the bread on our don'ts.
Okay, I have a carbon and a nitrogen, so I need to go back to another carbon. I've taken some egg cartons and torn them up. That's a great carbon source. So I'm going to put torn up egg cartons into my compost bin.
One thing that could go in both is the shredded paper. That's the beginning of our, can go either way. And that was one of the first things I started with, and the egg cartons as well.
I've saved some lint from my dryer. I'm going to add that to my backyard composting system. It's also a carbon, but it's hard to save enough of it, so I'm just going to put it in the same layer as my egg cartons.
Next, now we've got our worms in, we need to give them some food. So we're going to add in some fruit and vegetable scraps. That's working their way up, so they'll eat towards the surface.
I'm due for a green nitrogen source now. Just mowed the lawn and I have some nice fresh lawn clippings. So we're going to put those in next. Add a little more water.
For me, the next thing is going to be coffee grounds. We talked about that being grit, both for them to move through and for them to help with their digestion. And filters can go in too.
The next thing I pulled up was Bermuda grass. Now, if you have Bermuda grass, you don't want to put that in your compost bin because you will then have Bermuda grass everywhere in your yard that you put that compost. So that's a no. No to that Bermuda grass.
And for me, sweet pastries and pasta are no's. So those are going to go in my bin as well. Into the no bucket, onto our list.
The last thing I added was a green nitrogen source. So now I'm going to add some carbon. I'm going to put in some pine needles and some straw. Here's my pine needles, and here's my straw.
I'm going to add in just a touch more grit of eggshells that we'll crush up and some tea bags that'll help with the worm's digestion. We have our tea bags and crushed eggshell. Just a touch more of that grit.
I'm going to add in my leftover citrus peels from your grapefruit, your oranges, or your clementine mandarins. Don't put too many because they're kind of acidic. I'm going to add them in.
For me, the next layer is a bit more of the shredded paper for the bedding. And this time, we're going to need to water again so we keep it moist. A little bit of water, and a little bit of water.
Next, I'm going to add in some torn up cardboard pieces. It's a great carbon source, but I have to be careful. If my cardboard has any tape on it, I have to peel the tape off. That won't compost. So if you have tape, it's a don't.
So another don't is milk. That goes with our dairy products. We're pretty much finished feeding our worms, but you may like pizza, but pizza's not good for worms. That's another don't.
I'm not finished with mine yet. I'm going to add another green. I'm going to add some green weeds. Now when I picked these weeds, I made sure there were no seeds on the weeds. Put in some green weeds. Well, when I was outside in the weeds of the lawn, I also found some pet poop. That's a no. You do not put that in your backyard compost system.
That goes into our no bucket.
Our no bucket. But I can keep going. I have a big bin. I can add some seeds and nuts and shells from them into my compost bin. I could even put some brown weeds in, weeds that have dried out as long as they don't have seeds. Could I put in any meat? No, no meat. Meat does not belong in there. You will get critters in your backyard bin if you put in things they might like to eat. So I'm going to layer again. I'm going to put some green leaves in my bin. I'm going to keep watering. Make sure it's all moist. And then I know most people can collect these toilet paper rolls. but you have to chop them up so they'll decompose quicker. So you're going to put toilet paper rolls in, and I said you could put some brown weeds in, right? And I'm going to top it off with a nice layer of office paper. Not glossy, just regular. Because remember, the last layer is brown and the first layer is a brown carbon. So there's my office paper.
And on my last layer, we have a dry newspaper at the top, as I spoke of, that adds air to it. So it helps with aeration, but it also helps block out any little gnats or flies that are wanting to get into our system.
Sometimes my husband tries to give me other paper to shred, and it's glossy paper. Glossy paper does not belong in your compost. It will not compost. So that's our final don't. So you can see there are many things you don't want to compost, but many things you do want to compost. So things that are shared in the middle, newspaper goes in both, vegetables go in both, tea bags go in both, coffee and the coffee papers go in both, eggshells go in both, and
Or cardboard.
the cardboard, all chopped up or torn, can go in both. So now you have your recipe card written.